squeeze all the way past number 30.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the VOWH Scrutiny meeting. My name is Catherine Foxall. I'm co-chair of this committee. Chair of this committee. I'm not even co-chair. I'm just chair. And I'll be chairing this evening with my co-chair, Deputy Judy Roberts. Thank you for joining us, everybody, councillors, officers, and any members of the public who are watching online. So our first item of the agenda is apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Sally Pobolotsky, who's being substituted by Councillor Kira Bentley. Thank you very much. And Councillor Amos Devine, who is being substituted by Councillor Debbie Hallett. So thank you both for jumping in. And welcome everybody else on the committee. I think we've got a full house with most definitely quorum. So thank you very much. Is that all for apologies? Yeah. Item 2 on the agenda is Chair's announcements. I don't have anything dramatic to announce, just a bit of housekeeping, but I think everybody here works in this building. We haven't got members of the public. The disabled toilet in the open space, if anybody needs it, feel free. Fire exit is out of the door, turn right down the corridor and then turn left. The fire exit is marked if you need to go out the back under the stairs. I don't believe we have any fire alarm tests or anything planned, so hopefully we'll be not disturbed. So about this meeting, this is a meeting in public, but not a public meeting, and it's being recorded and broadcast live. So do please mind your language. Cameras and microphones can be very sensitive, so please just be aware that any rustlings or mutterings might be picked up by both cameras and microphones, and they do tend to swing around a bit. Please don't use your phones unless committee members, that's where you've got your documents. I think most of us got laptops. Please do not interrupt people when they're speaking. If you want to speak, please raise your hand and we'll make sure to get to everybody. And Judy, if you could help you and I, please, for hands, that would be really great. We do have quite a lot to get through. We've got 3 big items on the agenda this evening, so please try and keep questions short and to the point. Avoid discussing specific cases. I know it's really tempting, particularly when we're talking about things like enforcement. And if we can try and make kind of substantial general points first, that would be really helpful. I think that's about all I have to say. So item 3 then on the agenda is are there any declarations of interest or possible conflicts of interest related to tonight's agenda, whether that's pecuniary interests, other registrable interests or conflicts of interest? Nope, I think that's a no. So if we could please just check, item 4 is the minutes from our last meeting, and that was the last VOWH Scrutiny meeting, which was on the 31st of July, and that was when our main discussion was the Section 106 Affordable Housing Grant Policy. Is everybody happy with those minutes as a record of that meeting?
Yep.
Thank you. Do I need a proposer and a seconder?
Nods, heads and nods fine, yeah, everyone's happy.
Can I ask a question, Chair? Obviously, at that meeting, we made a number of recommendations to Cabinet. Is there any feedback mechanism by which those the reaction to those recommendations fed back through the committee or not?
I'm not sure whether there's. I attended the Cabinet meeting where those recommendations were discussed. I know, and certainly, obviously, there was the South Oxfordshire Scrutiny meeting had their meeting the day after as well. So there was some sense of having to combine 2 sets of recommendations into the policy. I believe that most of our recommendations were taken on board. There was quite a long discussion about. We'd had a long discussion about the gas boilers. And the wording of that has been changed, possibly not as far as we had recommended, but I think there was some change there. But I don't think there's a formal feedback mechanism.
Well, I suppose the question is, and should there be?
Well, what I can do, this particular one is I can contact the lead officer and see if there's anything further that we can provide to you as a follow-up.
I just feel that it seems to be a rather sort of sort of a lack in the system, if you know what I mean.
I think my comment on that is that you can always either attend a cabinet meeting if you're interested, or do what I do if it comes up with scrutiny, which is to actually watch the cabinet meeting online.
Mhm.
So if there's any feedback, that's sort of immediate.
So
I think because we don't have power to instruct, we are advising. I think that would be.
yeah, no, I understand the point, and you're a general punishment councillor on, as I know well. But I think it seems to me that as we make recommendations as a committee,
Yep.
there should be a mechanism by which feedback is made to us as a committee. That's my view.
Councillor.
Yes, I mean, it happens in another council I'm on, where we have an action tracker, and it goes to cabinet as an item of recommendations made from scrutinies, and that's all the scrutiny committees. And then you could set up an action tracker whereby then you have fully accepted, partially accepted, rejected against those items. And then if you object to that, you can then go back and watch the actual meeting on YouTube. Yes, YouTube, and see what was said at that particular meeting, should you disagree with or be surprised by the action tracker. But I'm not sure whether the officers feel they have enough capacity for that.
I have suggested before some form of tracker, and I can follow up again on it. I think it's a good idea. And for this one, maybe the cabinet minutes would be useful to you as well. But I'll see. I could send you those minutes and see if I can find anything else. And I will take your comments on board and put them in the minutes.
I propose that we mention this, and that perhaps, Councillor Roberts, that we could take that with officers and discuss it, and we could look at the models the examples you've mentioned, and look at it for future meetings. Okay.
Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing it up.
I wonder whether maybe perhaps at the end of the year there would be a little summary of what we've actually had an impact on.
Mhm.
It might be, because I agree. I think sometimes things go by the way, don't they? The recommendation, and then they just go into the ether.
Okay. So we should scrutinise the scrutiny.
Kind of,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
But hunt it,
I
but
think think my pearls of wisdom were disappearing into the ether without anyone noting them.
it's hard to believe.
Okay, we'll take that forward. Thank you, everybody. That was really helpful. So there's no declarations of interest. That was the minutes. So we're happy with the minutes. So I guess actually what we've just discussed really comes under 5, which is work schedule. Something we might want to consider as part of our work schedule then. So part of the agenda within the document pack for our agenda this evening is our future work schedule. You'll see this starting to fill out quite nicely. There's quite a lot on it. Do take a look at that. If there's items you think should be on it, items of particular interest that you want to be on it, do please talk to us about it. And it's also particularly important for the public, I think, to know what's coming up. And I'd note that the next meeting on the 5th of December, the 2 main items for discussion are on the Beacon in Wantage and NHS Bath, North East Somerset, Swindon and Wiltshire Integrated Care Board, which affects only really the very western edge of the Vale, but is very important in terms of health commissioning. So which is why we're bringing them, just as the joint scrutiny spoke to the BOB Integrated Care Board. So that's December. So do talk to your colleagues, particularly if there are colleagues around Wantage Grove who might like to be involved in that discussion next time. Do or Farringdon, the Western Vale. So public participation this evening, item 6. I don't believe we have any public
registered.
No. Okay. No one is interested in planning enforcement. Which brings us to item 7. So 3 main items we've got on our agenda this evening then are the financial outturn report, planning enforcement statement, and consultations and engagement report. So we're going to start with our financial outturn report 2022-2023. Many thanks to Richard Spraggett, who we have online, for authoring that report, and from our cabinet member Andy Crawford for joining us this evening to introduce that report. Thank you. And Simon Hewings, who you are head of finance, and Simon is here as well to talk to us about this. So thank you all for joining us this evening. I appreciate it's a late evening. Can I invite Councillor Crawford to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. So this is the report for the outturn for 22-23. I guess it's important to stress that the numbers in this report are the service department income and expenditure and investment income, and so it doesn't actually give you, it's intended to give you the bottom line figure for 22-23. For example, it excludes things like the council tax collection, where reference is made to NMDR business rates. There isn't a bottom line number that we're presenting tonight or that Simon's presenting tonight. That tells you what the net result is. I could talk to that later. It's also possibly worth stressing that the way that budget monitoring works is that, correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, Simon and Richard, is that we're expecting service departments to identify any variances over 50,000, which tend to get therefore in the report. There'll be some individual service areas where variances might be greater than that. Some of it is explained, and those bits that aren't explained is because they're made up of multiple smaller variances that are below the £50,000 limit. Obviously, thank you those people, by the way, that provided questions in advance, and we can obviously go through those later on. It's helpful to have those to prepare ourselves. I guess that the headline is that our net expenditure was less than expected, mostly because our investment income was very significantly greater than expected. And there is some carry forward in revenue expenditure for the year 22-23 that will be carried forward into the current year, which would have actually put us over budget. And the other thing, I guess, to bear in mind is that after a number of years of pretty stable interest rates and inflation, which obviously our budgets are based, there was quite a significant change. There was beginning to be a significant change in this year, which impacted both our income and expenditure. So some of the variances that you have questions about do relate to impacts of RPI and interest rates. I think that's all I'm going to say. It's always your choice as to how you question me on this. It might be easier to take individual points first that people have got, and then any sort of general points towards the end. To a certain extent, some of the individual answers, the answers to individual questions might then be forfeited. So it's obviously your choice, Chair.
Thank you ever so much, Councillor Crawford, for that brief summary. Richard or Simon, do you have anything you want to add at this point? You're very welcome to.
I was just going to add one point, just to back up Councillor Crawford's last point about interest and interest rates and inflation. The budget was set in the middle of February 22 or 22-23, and it was actually set the week before the war in Ukraine started. So that would explain why lots of the numbers in this report changed, in terms of costs going up and interest rates going up. Were not foreseen at the point at which the budget was, and obviously the budget was drafted long before we brought the report to committee in terms of putting it all together. That's just a little bit of context to support Councillor Crawford's comment.
I plan to build in a crystal ball into next year's budget.
Yes, that would be really good. Richard, did you have anything you wanted to add at this point? I think you're muted.
Apologies. No, there's nothing for me at the moment. I'm happy to. I forwarded the questions to and my answers to Andy, but I'm happy to answer specific questions as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So we do have some councillors who have already indicated that they've got some interest in particular areas of the report. So I probably will start with them. And we've mentioned inflation and interest, and I know Councillor Batstone, you were particularly interested in slippage, and whether you want to ask about that now, to particularly address that.
I must admit, that was particularly on the capital report. I suppose my real worry is and that probably your worry as well, is inflation means that if there's any slippage in capital expenditure, then effectively the money that we slip into a future year is less valuable because of inflation. Combination of costs going up, well, mainly costs going up. Is there any way of accounting for that? And in particular, can we budget capital projects for the expenditure in the current year?
I'll try and answer that. The way this will work, by the way, is that I'll pick up the easy questions and then Simon will either expand upon it or correct me. So I guess when a capital budget is put forward, it's done on the basis of best efforts. And sometimes it has to be done before we've got, quotes, very often before we've got final quotes. And you're absolutely right, particularly in the way building industry is at the moment, knock-on effect from both RPI and COVID as well, I think, that some of the prices have increased quite dramatically. So we've seen instances recently where we've budgeted a certain amount, it's been delayed, partly because of maybe internal reasons and resourcing of getting projects off the ground, but also maybe the lack of tenders, the need to re-tender. And I think that would be true to say at the moment, the building industry, particularly in this area, is very much a seller's market. So your question was, can we budget? Your other question was, can we budget in year? Yes, we can. And quite often we do have individual cabinet member decisions that had to be made to create a budget for something that wasn't previously identified in the annual budget setting cycle. So yes, we can do it. I think it would be true to say as well, if you look back over the years, that our capital budget and the actual outturns have very often been very different. And Simon and I discussed this some months ago, and with taking a new approach to budget setting for capital this year, and partly we're doing it much earlier than we did before. It used to be a bit of an add-on afterthought after the revenue budget. Being both more realistic, I think, about the amount as much as we can, but also the deliverability of it, which is quite often a function of how many staff we have to be able to work up a particular project. But yes, you're right. Any delay for a project we have to do in times of inflation will cost us money.
Yeah, I was just going to expand a little bit on what we're doing at the moment on capital. So for the last 2 years, which the main focus of budget setting challenge activity has been revenue. And it's probably fair to say we've neglected capital. We're putting that right this year by doing a thorough capital programme challenge, where we're asking questions very much on the lines you've just asked. So have we got the budget in the right year? Is the budget enough? Now, interestingly, there are some projects where the budget isn't enough. There are actually a surprising number of projects where I think our officers have been very prudent and built in contingency into the figures they've put in the budget, and that's sort of meaning that the budgets they've put in are satisfactory. What we need to do going forward is support looking at capital more often and more regularly, and we're getting additional resources into finance to enable us to do that, because it has been something we just have not devoted the time to in recent years.
Okay, thanks very much on that.
That's useful to hear. Thank you. Councillor Forder.
Just a comment to the question. Is there not some mitigation in terms of, in a time of higher interest rates, in that if the capital expenditure is not made, it remains on deposit and therefore earns interest?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, it's not complete because obviously inflation is higher than that, but much more so than in past years.
So quite often the capital monies that we're spending will maybe come from Section 106 agreements, which we receive the cash for, and yes, we're investing in. And so let's spend earlier on, investment comes up a lot, so there will be some offsets. I guess we also shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the reason we want to spend this money is because we want to buy something. So, for example, the changing rooms at Wantage Leisure Centre have been on the capital programme for a long time now. I'm frustrated not just because we haven't spent the money, but we haven't improved rather poor changing rooms. Now, the good reason for that not having happened, it's a real shame that we haven't been able to upgrade them as we would like, given the fact we've had a budget.
I think particularly Wantage Leisure Centre really came out in the joint scrutiny discussion about the leisure centres as well, and customer satisfaction.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any other specific questions on inflation or interest? I think we've got the implications of that. Thank you. I wanted to ask generally, before we get into some of the specific items, how do you guys see our immediate financial health? Are you happy? Are there elements you're particularly concerned about? Are there areas of immediate concern? Are there areas where you think scrutiny could help? But also, how does this outturn report reflect our medium-term health going forward? So I think in terms of flagging up any concerns that perhaps need to be looked at.
That's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
To a certain extent, we're starting in the wrong place because it'd be much better to look at the budget setting process first, I think, and that would probably be more informative. Well, there's a few new councillors here, so I'll try and explain it as best I can. The medium-term financial plans sees us running out of reserves in 5 years' time. And back in 2019, when I first became cabinet member of finance, it saw us running out of money this year, so we had pushed that boat out quite a long way. The concerns that I have are the concerns that I've addressed many times. One, when we are rate capped as we are, only being able to increase council tax by 2.5%, when our costs are going up higher than that, contracts with people like BIPA or GLL or whatever, and staffing costs in particular, we are effectively losing money. We have no opportunity. So that's one big issue, particularly bearing in mind we're a very, very low cost council tax charging authority. Last time I looked, I think we were about 50th cheapest in the lowest in the country. So we're starting from a very low base and limited at how much we increase council tax by. The other big unknown, of course, when you set the budget, or as you set the budget in the longer term, is knowing what the government are going to provide. Support have shrunk quite significantly over very many years, and they don't really give us any great future plans as to how much they're going to be giving us, 2 or 3 or 4, 5 years time, so that the numbers in the medium-term financial plan become, frankly, more and more, back of a fag packet. Can we possibly tell what inflation is going to be in 3 or 4 years' time? And can we possibly know what the government is going to be giving us the answers to both those questions? I know. So yes, we should be concerned, but I'm also happier today than I was just over 4 years ago. I think that council is a better financial shape, and as you might want to discuss later on, there are several transformation projects in the budget, which will hopefully improve that further. Quite what future governments might do with open government finances. Actually seen.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very candid and very helpful. Thank you. Should we move on to some of the specifics that I think a couple of people have raised? Councillor Hallett, you had some specific questions about planning and corporate transformation, which has just been mentioned.
So going by page numbers, on page 11, the first thing that jumped out at me was massive overspend for planning service. Sorry, Adrian. And I was wondering this is a high percentage of overspend. What happened to cause this? That's the question I sent in earlier, so I don't know.
Yeah, so we call it an overspend. That's the jargon, but it's really an underachievement of income. The vast majority of it, and on page 14, you do identify I think it's the development control portion of that. But there'll be other parts of planning, for example, border control, which I think also underachieved income.
Is it 2.5 million?
I believe so, yeah. Adrian might want to
that would explain that.
But it's almost all failure to the income targets, which again, if you're budgeting in advance, Adrian's team cannot possibly know for sure how many applications are going to come in. I think there's also, to be honest, again, implications from COVID which has slowed down the building industry to a certain extent. Prices have gone up dramatically. Perhaps people are less keen to build. The market has also cooled down a bit as well. Building houses that you don't know you could sell. So there's a combination of effects. Bearing in mind we have to budget something, and this particular year was particularly bad.
So if I repeat back to you in layman's terms, what I think I just heard you say, we budgeted £212,000 for planning service, and the actual spend was 797. But that was because we were expecting approximately 500,000 more in income to augment that 200,000 that's on the budget. Is that about it? Looking at that line item on
This is table 1, Louis.
it's on page 11. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
the 212 was a net expenditure. So after all income
okay,
and
I
after
understand.
all revenue and all expenditure. The other thing I should stress is that these net expenditure figures on table 1 on page 11, 16 million budgeted, that is a net figure. So that the total gross expenditure of the council is over 50 million.
Yes.
What's here is the net for each of those services. So expenses less any income that service.
Thank you.
Adrian, did you want to comment while you're here as head of planning on any of that? You don't have to because this isn't your item. Okay. Thank you so much. I think specifically on planning, my concern was that perhaps we've obviously had a lot of discussion with the Secretary of State this year that perhaps that had, but I understand from this discussion that that's not had any bearing.
The discussion was this year. This is a report up until March 20.
Of course it is. Yes, of course. Does anybody else have anything else they want to?
On planning, yes, I did.
Planning item?
I did put in a question actually. My glass on so I can read. In paragraph 27, it states that income budgets have been reduced for 2023-24, and that leads on from what you were saying, Councillor Crawford, about the income being far less this year than was anticipated. But has there been any corresponding reduction in budgeted expenditure levels? I know it's difficult at the moment.
All right, so that's not out. That's out with the nature of this report, isn't it?
Well, presumably, so is the fact that income budgets have been reduced.
Well, that's probably true as well. The answer is I don't know. Adrian might like to answer that if you're able to.
At the end of this year, yes, you'll see that there's a reduction in expenditure.
Thank you very much. I won't ask how much.
We can await that next year.
I'll remember the question.
Do write it down in diary. I think at the moment we're all looking at a joint developing a new joint local plan, and I think these kind of things are significant if we're talking about income that comes in from planning applications in the context when we're talking about allocating sites. So are there implications of these figures for how we as councillors need to approach the joint local plan and officers as well? I think it would be, we need to start tying these things up to make sure that we're thinking sensibly,
So planning isn't my bag, I must confess. Well clear of it. Thanks, Adrian. I guess a lot of the local plan won't have any impact on budgets, but clearly total number of houses that we expect to build or are required to build will drive the number of applications that come forward, that will drive the resource requirements within planning.
Mm-hmm.
That's planning. That's a balancing act that it's Adrian's job to manage. So I imagine will be coming forward with a budget for the coming year that takes into account the expectations, in particular of housing numbers, amongst other things that the local plan might impact. Off the top of my head, I can't think there's any major implications on the local plan for the department. In budget terms, but I might be wrong. Other than housing numbers.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Hallett, you were also interested, conversely, on underspend in corporate transformation.
Yeah, paragraph 9. I wonder where we could see this, the details of this spend. It's just a anyone?
Sorry, can I just check? Are you asking what it will be spent on?
No, the corporate transformation budget was underspent by 558,000. I was asking to see the detail of that. What was the budget for corporate transformation? How much did we spend?
So I can't remember the figures off the top of my head. I don't know whether Richard's got them, but basically the transformation budget from memory in total is a one-off budget.
I thought it was only 500,000. That's why.
No, I think it's 750. Because we had, that's what I'm trying to remember, because we had money in and we topped it up.
Okay.
So I think it's what's left in the original growth bid, and will be carried forward.
Okay.
What it will be spent on, as Adriana's on online, but certainly at the moment the priorities are the new planning system, grounds maintenance, customer services.
Okay.
They're the current priorities, but there'll be a whole raft of work that team will do.
Okay.
And my understanding is also it was 750. Yeah. I think that's probably if we can do the changing management priorities. Is devil's drink, if you like, with a certain number of things, isn't it?
So is this budget basically under the control of SMT?
Well,
Adriana's got
the budget is set by cabinet, as you've seen that called well, but our ability to deliver those transformation projects is impacted by a whole host of things, not least of all staff availability, and possibly we have to.
Yeah, of course. Those are two different things. Failure to deliver is one thing, changing priorities is another.
Well, if the priorities are dealing with something that is urgent at the time, that has to be done. That is a change in priorities, which pushes back the desire to follow the transformation.
Adriana, did you want to jump in on that point?
Hello, yes, I can just try and provide some extra explanation. So in terms of the specifics of 22-23, the underspend really reflects management decisions around profiling of the transformation programme rather than changes in management priorities. So the transformation programme currently has around 16 projects in it over a sort of 3 to 4 year period. That in itself is not static, because the intention is very much that the transformation sort of programme will be ongoing. But specifically in 22-23, we made a decision to bring forward the planning and regulatory services project, and that changed the profiling of spend because it was a much bigger project, and the majority of the IT system costs, which Simon just referred to, fell into 23-24. So that sort of explains that specific underspend. It's more around profiling. We also made a decision to create a dedicated transformation team, and obviously just the recruitment to that took a natural timeline, and the transformation program manager only joined. We had a vacancy and they started on Monday. In terms of the wider transformation budget, there is the one-off budget that both Councillor and Simon just referred to. We also have some specific pots with IT spend as well, and that is work that Simon and I are going to progress to make sure there's additional clarity on the transformation budget. And there is a transformation item on the scrutiny work plan coming forward in future months where we'll be able to provide a much greater explanation.
Can I just add, I think there's a paper coming to cabinet as well, actually, about the transformation programme. And obviously, once it comes to cabinet, that's something that you might very rightly wish to scrutinise separately.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, Adriana. That was very helpful. Other questions on the financial outturn report? Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask about the development of corporate landlord. The notes on page 13 to 14 are useful, and clearly, because I did notice it sort of was up and down and all over the face of it. So that explains the ups and the downs. My question really was, we were pursuing a project of buying houses for refugees, is that in the development and corporate landlord budget, or is that?
It's not in here at all because it was done after the 31st
So
of
that's
March
coming to the next year.
23.
So that's not part of the ups and downs.
Absolutely not.
And then that's still true when it does arrive next year. Which is it going to be in the housing budget or is it going to be in the corporate land?
Housing.
To be in the housing budget. Okay, thank you. Okay. But the notes were very helpful because I was very confused until I read the notes.
Councillor Gascoigne.
Yep, so while we're on development and corporate landlord, just had a couple of questions on that section. And there's a bit that says car parking fees have been adjusted to make up the shortfall. I just quite sure what that means, adjusted. That means in the next year we've increased car parking fees as part of the natural process of when we review car parking fees each year. Is that what that sentence means?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's looking forward.
Yes, okay.
The fees went up. Whether or not that makes up the shortfall is again unknown because we don't know what the issue is.
Precisely, yeah. And then, okay, another kind of forward question then. So the grounds team budget was overspent, but because we're changing the way we do that, we're expecting future years that shouldn't happen.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd go further than that. The grounds maintenance, as you just heard, is a transformation project.
Yes.
Yes. I think the total grounds maintenance budget is around £800,000. I think the transformation project will be looking at ways that we can manage the budget better, but also produce better outcome.
Yeah, better service and lower cost and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Forder.
Just to go back on the car parking fees, which I'd also picked up. I don't think, I'm not sure that perhaps we need slight further clarification because in fact what it states is car parking fees have been adjusted to make up the shortfall in 2023-24. So that's a clear statement that an increase has been made specifically to cover the shortfall. Now I understand that, but my concern is that given that the fact that car parking fees had fallen because of a failure in demand, and COVID and other reasons, but given the case, isn't there a risk that if we just start increasing the fees, that means that we'll suppress the demand for parking more and we'll create a downward spiral? I mean, it seems quite an unusual thing to do if demand is low, to start increasing costs, start increasing prices, because that actually pushes down demand.
The price elasticity is very
difficult. It's very to have a long discussion about that.
It's very difficult to assess, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's certainly not the case if you increase car parking fees by 10%, you'll necessarily get 10% more income. Again, I think that the whole car parking environment took a massive hit during COVID. You could drive around and see all the car parks empty, so the shops are empty and all the rest of it. So it is difficult, and it certainly is the case. If you increase the car parking fees exponentially, you're going to see a loss of income. The car parking fees that have been set are still either cheaper or as cheap, and all of our neighbouring councils apart from the west, and that might, if not even, be the case now actually. So it's not as if we're out of sync with others. There is a quarterly SABA is the contractor that manages our car parks. There's a quarterly SABA meeting that John Packley and his team have, looking at things like this to keep on top of performance, both operational performance and financial. So it's something that they are reasonably close to. I hope your next question is not how we're doing this year, so don't know the answer to that. It is something that is monitored, and you're absolutely right. You know, we don't want to price ourselves out of the market, and it's not certainly not the case. If you increase fees by X, then income will go up by X.
No, I mean, obviously the concern would be that it was a sort of a knee-jerk reaction to a decrease in revenues to increase costs.
It wasn't knee-jerk.
It does require a lot of monitoring and so in order to make sure that that isn't happening.
So in December of every year, we get a car parking fees and charges paper to Cabinet. which is discussed at length, a great length actually. So it's a quite comprehensive. It's quite a comprehensive document, and so it's, I certainly wouldn't describe it as knee-jerk.
Right, okay. And as you know, it's a
I
question
think we need
that
to
always
move
comes
on.
up this, but, well,
Yeah.
I'm conscious we have 2 more reports to get through this evening. Councillor Hallett, did you have another
Yeah,
question?
one more question, please. It's for educational purposes, I'm afraid. On paragraph 30, we are comparing the revenue outturn from previous year to the current year, and it's the same. The carried forward budgets are the same. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I spotted that, and I think that might be a mistake, Debbie. It seems
Sometimes I spot these mistakes and Simon goes running out of the room.
it does seem
That's
very
the
unlikely
highlight of my
that
career.
the carried forward budget was exactly the same for 2 years running to the nearest £1,000.
Yeah.
I
Anyone's
think
got any other questions?
what Simon's going to say is, can we come back to you on that, probably?
Yeah. In that case, moving on. Our recommendation from officers is to note this report and provide any comments to Cabinet. Are there comments that we should be providing to Cabinet that the committee would like to propose? Anything that we particularly want the Cabinet to take note of or keep an eye on?
I'll just raise a point about the beacon and the lack of income from there. As a newbie and a stand-in on the committee, I hope I'm not sort of out of order, but some of the comments have got a consequence of, so car parking fees have been adjusted, but there's nothing about improvement of income potential or a review, and I know there are things in the leisure department that are, but I just think there needs to be some reference to how that would be addressed.
Okay, so a substantial report on the beacon is coming to our next scrutiny meeting. So I'm fairly content to park a substantial discussion of the beacon now, but I do think it's important that we know that, because it is, it is quite a significant item in that report. But and if anybody wants to, I think in the context of this report, if there's any comments about the beacon and you guys want to make now.
Good way for the report, I think that's going to be a comprehensive report.
Okay. I think it would be sensible for us as a committee as well to bear this in mind, so that we can bring this to next month's meeting.
But some reference to the fact that that will be looked at in that report might be useful, because it just looks like, oh well, income's down.
So can we minute then as a specific action from this meeting that we request that detail about that is included in next month's report regarding the beacon? That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Can I confirm that the 1433 is exactly the right number from last year's report? It's a complete loop, but it is correct.
Okay.
Well done.
If anyone wants to independently verify, I've got it on the screen in front of me.
Take your route.
there's a sense of victory coming from your side.
Sense of relief.
Can I just respond on what Kira has just said? I think you're quite right, Kira. But it's true of all items, actually. Whenever there is a variance of any significance, then we ought to be thinking about why is that? What, if anything, do we need to do about it? So it almost needs to be a generic paragraph in here, actually, that says, where there have been significant variances identified, those are, examined and considered as a priority for the next year's budget. And I'm sure we get it right. And that would be true of anything that's significant. It could be, in some instances, there's nothing we can do about it. Houses are being built, for example. But I think it's true. So just a general paragraph to say that that's one of the things that informs the budget setting process next time round might be valuable.
So are there any burning comments we want to put to the Cabinet? I think probably the general context is really to note that we are in a better financial position, obviously, than we were a few years ago, but obviously times are incredibly challenging. Thank you all for the work that you're doing to make sure that we are long-term in a good position. And I think, yes, we'd obviously just want to ask the Cabinet to keep their eyes on it, and do let us know if there's anything that we can look at more closely. And I know that we'll be looking at the beacon in particular next time. But particularly, I think I would be interested in making sure that the local plan takes account of any planning budgetary. But I think generally our comment to Cabinet is noted.
Yeah, noted. And do you want me to add a little bit in there about committee commented that they'd like to see details of Beacon in low income in the next report? Do you want me to put that in there as well?
Possibly. So
Is everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
The results of cabinet, we can find further sources of income, couldn't we? That would be a good thing to do.
And I think I know also there's obviously a lot of transformational work happening, and it would be really great to see next year that doesn't get pushed and that does actually manage to happen. So good luck. Thank you ever so much. If anybody who was just here for that item wants to abandon ship, you're very welcome. But otherwise, we'll move on to item 8, which is planning enforcement statement.
Yeah, I'm going to be that person that abandons ship. That's right.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Thank you very much. Yeah, probably ship was the wrong word to use today.
I'm sailing home.
Yeah. Great. So item 8 is our planning enforcement statement update for the year. So we have author Emma Turner, who I gather you are head of team leader for the enforcement team. And we have head of planning Adrian Duffield. Thank you very much. And this is going to be presented by our cabinet member, Councillor Diana Lagova. So thank you ever so much, and I invite you to introduce your report.
Thank you, Chair. So this current report, which was circulated to committee member, provides an update on the continued planning enforcement improvement. So the first performance update was presented at the end of December 2022. So this current report actually provides further update of performance, including managing live cases. It covers 12 months from September 2022 till September, till the end of September 23. So during this 12 months period, on hand enforcement cases, numbers has been reduced. We had 229 in September 22, and it was reduced to 161 in September 23. So, and the kind of steady performance improvement was maintained during this 12 months period. So just all data were presented in graphs and charts, just to give you better view. So just you can see on page 22 on graph 1, the overall cases continue steadily to fall. So it was requested for the reporting on all the cases that we have quite, just still quite, just cases over 6 weeks and even 6 months. And just again, they're presented on graph 2 on page 23. It confirms that those cases the number of those cases continue to reduce. However, there are external but just the video that we are on the way to get there. So yeah, just again the planning enforcement statement, which was circulated to all members, just that describe the approach to enforcement, and actually just if you have any questions, we'll be happy to address. So the team feels that just they fully built, so to speak. Just there is no need to make any changes at this time. So thank you so much, and we welcome any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lagova. Adrian or Emma, did you have any comments you wanted to pick up on now before we get going?
I'd just like to add just a slight clarification. The resource that we added out in April of the 2 additional officers has helped us actually achieve a more consistent 6-week figure, which is one of our main performance targets. We were slightly inconsistent before. We're much more consistent going forward, and we see that will continue now that they are permanent. There are permanent members or roles in the team rather than it was a temporary measure when it was initially introduced. So we're very pleased that it is worked very well, and we see that progressing to be consistently, so that we can actually focus on the items that were mentioned in GRAP 2, which is our older cases, to try and get those numbers down.
Thank you ever so much. Committee. Who would like to kick off with the questions? Councillor Masson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at graph 1 on page 22. Could you explain a little bit more about what an on-hand case against an open case? What's my question basically is, what's an on-hand case, and what's closed is self-explanatory, but what's an open case and what's an on-hand case?
Okay. So the graph on page 22 has 3 elements each month. So how many cases we open, how many cases we close, and how many cases are on hand, which are then live and continuing.
So the open ones are
new cases. Yeah.
Oh, now we've broken the seal now. Councillor Gaspar.
Well, I was just to add to that, that was Councillor Manson wasn't at that meeting. That's the exact question I asked at the last time we looked at it's not your fault. What I'm getting at is maybe that needs to be in the report explained.
So new.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, it would have been helpful to have a comparison to last year's, maybe, like just out of interest. I understand the applications are less this year, so how much less and how much more is that costing us would have been interesting. And I'm guessing that not all enforcement cases are equal. So are you just counting new cases, or is there a difficulty element in there as well that relates to work?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I think no, you're quite right. Not all enforcement cases are equal for lots of different factors. However, this is actually a graph that just shows volume. This is to actually give you an understanding of the capacity and the actual amount of work going through the team. The team. So it's we don't actually look at difficulty as such in that way. If you look at the enforcement statement, within our enforcement statement, we actually all cases are triaged, and then they're given a priority based on the our system that we've got in the enforcement statement, and that's how we actually not grading is the wrong word, but that's how we differentiate between the types of case.
I wonder whether
cases will take longer to resolve.
To be able to drill into that, then to say, a low impact enforcement can sit at the bottom of the list, but it will stay on your figures for quite a considerable amount of time, whereas a high impact, big development enforcement issue that we all want to get sorted and would be high profile, we would want that resources spent on that to get it cleared up as quickly as possible, I'm guessing.
Okay, well, we don't actually yeah, so when we it isn't we don't actually make decisions based on profile. We look at actually the breach of planning control. So, for example, a listed building case is actually a criminal matter instantly. So that has to give a top priority for us, because obviously there's a very serious offence potentially going on. So we commit within the statement to get out to those, to actually have a look at those within 48 hours maximum, to actually get there first hand. But if we've got something that is much lower priority within our priority scheme, so for example, at the moment, depending on factors and triaging, an advert, a general sort of for sale sign, that may very well sit. So the number of people who raise an issue with us doesn't change priority. It isn't actually the number of people. Obviously, it's an indication of the impact, but it's not a reason. So, for example, lots of people shouting doesn't mean to say that we jump quicker. No. However, it's actually they're planning harm that we are focusing on. Yeah. So that they report to us where we see the potential for the most planning harm will get the highest priority.
But we don't see any of this, what we would like to see is that those high priorities are dealt with and acted on quickly, and the resources for the low priorities can bubble along. And if at some point Cabinet wants to change that priority, that's up to them. But so just looking at the numbers, it's very difficult to gauge the public perception of how we're performing, if you like. I can look at the figures and say, yes, we've cleared up cases quickly, but the impact of those to the public at large, I think, could be expressed.
To help, it's easy to recognise that sometimes the bigger cases, as said, high profile, we may have to wait time for notices to be served, and meanwhile we're dealing with the other cases that may be in the view of lower priority, but actually they're still important.
Do you feel it kind of evens itself out and perhaps?
I think about even it is what it is. It's actually that's what it is. That's what we're going to work with, and we try and manage with the resources to deal with it as efficiently as possible. Can I just clarify? You mentioned about planning applications. So planning applications gets a fee, and that is reducing at the moment in terms of the industry, etc. Enforcement is quite different. This is about new investigations. There is no correlation with new applications or applications reducing and the enforcement caseload. You might get a situation where in granting consent for houses, there's more houses, but there's potential for breaches of planning. But I know over a number of years, I haven't seen much of a correlation at all between the two. So the enforcement case is purely the customers, parishes, us identifying breaches of planning, and then, as Emma mentioned, through the process, the triaging process, we categorise and refine them down to make sure we deal with the most planning harm cases, the most difficult cases first, as a priority. And the team will, I think, as Emma mentioned, listed buildings would be a high priority for us, for example, compared with, let's say, an advert, which, I remember the public might think that advert is unacceptable, but actually in planning harm, it may not be as great as clear listed buildings.
Not every single case that we're talking about, so not every advert is the same, not every listed building, unfortunately. And each case has to really pass planning phrase, each case on its merits. So we have to look at each individual case to see how we're going to react to it. And we do try, and that's why we introduced the triaging and priority scheme to make sure we are dealing with these things as efficiently as we possibly can, given the whole range of circumstances that can come up.
Thank you. Sure, it's very complex.
I have Councillor Hallett, then Councillor Porter, then Councillor Gascoigne.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really good news report. I think congratulations to Emma and Adrian and Paula. Paula's online too. Really well done. Diana, you've taken it over at a time where it's in the success zone, in the green zone, so that's really good. I think that it's obvious that the improvement of the in instituting the processes and controls that you have made on your workload. I also noticed that the people who had the suggestion many years ago that we just need to put more staff in there may have been right, because the two people that you've added to your team are helping to reduce the remaining backlog of on-hand cases. Remembering that this report is to describe the progress towards reducing the number of on-hand cases, and it isn't really talking about other things for tonight's meeting. I wondered if there's any kind of statutory requirement in performance for the enforcement team. No. Okay. So you set your own targets and your own standards. Correct. Okay.
At the present time, so the planning reforms has identified and recommending there will be national targets for enforcement.
Okay.
We can see what they are, but we don't know as yet the details about what that will look like.
Okay. Is that Does that inspire hope or fear?
No,
No.
Yeah.
We don't want to be smug here, but we think we've actually identified some of them, which is where we transformed the service as in the way that we have. It's good. We have actually, and maybe this is the right point to blow the trumpet a bit, in the fact we've had other councils actually contact us about our
that's terrific news. That's
scheme
great.
to say that they like the look of it, and other councils are reacting. I think, Adrian, you've had
Yes.
some actual experience of that as well.
That's really good.
So we can be smug.
It is
You
it is true that the last mile is the hardest, and it's good that you put in paragraph 10 about the really intractable cases, the oldest cases that you just have to wait for courts to resolve it or notices to be served or actions to be taken, and it's not really within your control. It might be helpful for your stats reporting if you find a way to split those out. Okay, so I don't know if that matters to everybody or the people to whom you report your stats. I don't know if that would matter, but I just noticed that. But that's really the only thing I have to say. So thank you very much for this. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett. Councillor Porter.
I would echo Councillor Hallett's comments about all the numbers going in the right direction, nearly all of them, except you might add to their smugness. So I think we need to be careful about that.
It's all smugness.
And I'd like to add, actually, I thought it was an admirably clear report. So thank you very much for that. Makes reading it very, very easy, except for some of those graphs which were a bit taxing on the eyes. And I know that's all right. The one area of slight concern for me is the number of the old cases which haven't come down and seem to be stuck there. And I know you're putting more resources into that. And hopefully, therefore, next time you come back to us, we'll see that there is being actually a decrease in the number of those cases. But if I were going to, from this report, make any particular suggestion we should make to the Cabinet, it would be exactly about those actually that we need to maintain the pressure to make sure those old backlog of time expired cases are cleared, so that they start moving in the right direction with all the other key indicators.
Just to check there, because I think in terms of cleared may be too ambitious. I think it may reduce, because I think we're always going to have a rolling, because it is a rolling programme, as you can see it in terms of workload. We're always going to get some that could be.
I just thought I would use reduce and juice different in the word, so I apologise.
No,
reduce was what I meant.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Gascoigne.
Yes, it was kind of building on what Kira was saying, because I think what she's trying to say, what she was saying it, but is, and what Councillor Hallett was saying, it's a great report and it's a great news story, but I think there's more detail in that. What you just explained all about the triaging and how that's really helped, like, doesn't come across in the report because it's just the numbers rather than the complexity that goes behind it. So, and already mentioned about how there aren't you're going to your own KPIs, aren't you? It's not something So do you have KPIs around the complexity of it, the whole, like, are we? No, it's just the pure figures rather than have we resolved the ones that fall the highest. Okay. That was all my question was.
I'd just like to say, I understand why you would like to know a little bit more about that. It's actually very difficult to set a KPI on that. So it's much easier for us to actually look at efficiencies and look at those sorts of elements. So actually, when you start, as I said, every single case can be very different, and it might be the subject matter or the people involved that make a case take longer, or the people's situations. We're looking at planning harm, which isn't black and white. None of what we, as you know from planning decisions, they're all based on the development plan, a whole number of factors, and that's exactly the same for planning enforcement as well. So, but I do take your comments, and I thank you for your interest and enough to actually sort of consider all those elements, because I think it is something good, because we do want to progress. This isn't the end. This isn't what we're trying to achieve. We're on a journey here. Without using an awful J word, I've used it. And so therefore, once we've achieved a really, the next stage is to then start to drill down a little bit more to see what we can do to improve again, because we're not complacent at all. we do want to improve even further and provide a really good service for the residents.
I do think we need to be a bit careful though, because when we start talking about qualitative KPIs, they are very, very difficult to draw up and assess. And the problem is that a department can then spend hours and days working out actually how to set the qualitative KPIs and how to measure them, and they finish up not having any time to actually deal with cases. So I think we sometimes the best can be the enemy of the good.
I agree. I think you're sort of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. This report is concise and readable, as a newcomer kind of assimilating this, it's like that absolutely makes sense. I can see the performance improved, etc. And I wouldn't want to see reams of real detail and things, but it was just a comment. Yeah.
If I may, with my nature recovery hat on as well, is that one kind of flashing light for me was the comment about in paragraph 12 about biodiversity net gain, and your comment that is unlikely that councils will be able to monitor biodiversity sites. You don't say it's unlikely that we will be able to, but I just wonder what planning is being put in place to ensure that we can, particularly, I know speaking to officers in the climate team, they are ambitious. They do want us to be a showcase council for biodiversity net gain. We also need to make sure in that case that we're monitoring that. And I just wondered what work is being done. You're obviously aware of it.
Yeah. I've gone. Do you want to?
No, I'll let you take.
So just in terms of start off with the new legislation, there's an awful lot on the horizon. We've got sort of 25, 30 year monitoring of some sites that we're going to have to undertake. And we want to put quite a bit of the onus, if we can, onto developers or landowners to do that. However, what we need to wait for is the regulations and the details, and we haven't got that yet. So we don't quite know yet. And to be honest, I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't think government know yet exactly how it will work out.
Yeah.
But once we've got that, we can then establish in terms of how we can run it, how we can work it. We see that as a major piece of work for the service or the councils in terms of how we manage that going forward. And we obviously will be working with the climate change team with that as well. The other area is just to sort of tuck in, but linked to that is about other areas of work is the proactive working. So we mentioned in the report, I think it's paragraph 7, where we talk about there could be themes we look at, it could be conservation areas, or it could be adverts, whatever, that we can do sort of a particular theme for 6 months of the year that we focus on certain aspects to help get the message across that actually we want to deal with things that have impact on immunity or character of the area, for example.
And whether or not actually there's still lots of different aspects of biodiversity net gain, and obviously if you've got a condition of a planning approval, that very much will sit with my team, but not all aspects of this will necessarily sit within planning enforcement. So it's a case of us, once we know what we're looking at, we can have a conversation across the departments and work out the best strategy for the council and which teams will do which part.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Councillor Roberts, sorry, I jumped in on you.
Yes, I've got 3 very tiny questions. One was, are the original planning officers being more involved in the enforcement work? 2 was, there weren't any comments about how parish councils were contacting you and getting annoyed. Is that because we've actually got to the point where we are dealing with the enforcements in a time where they've gone, or have they just given up and gone away? Because this was always the comment that there were people bashing on the door. And the third one was, coming up with the back of the themes, does drainage come under enforcement, or is that one of the things that, because it is now external to the planning application, is it external to the enforcement as well?
You said 3 small questions. Yes and no. Oh yes, planning officers. So yes, we do work across the department, and we have internal systems, so we're able to see. So planning officers are able to see our cases and vice versa. So there's a lot of discussion, joint visits, etc. So there is joint working. So and retrospective applications are of course an area where officers will discuss different aspects and work together.
Second one was the parishes.
So actually, we're attending. We've just done a round of parish
forums where we've talked, or when we first introduced our new statement and the way of working, this new way of working, we did have a lot of feedback and a lot of complaints actually. And actually in the last, I can say hand on heart, we've not had any in the last sort of 6 months at all. So, and actually the feedback, the message is getting through that it isn't that we don't want to talk to people, it's the fact that there are investigations when they're in train, we can't keep updating everybody. It's not appropriate. But we, out of courtesy, do inform anybody that's contacting us about a case, we inform them the outcome. So that message is getting across. So and we're making sure that obviously there's information on the website, etc. And working with customer services in terms of any communication from parishes. So that's I feel as though that is working well. But please, obviously, you guys are much closer to the parishes maybe than we are. So if there is anything that you like, do feed up to the team, into the team. If there is in particular, or through Adrian or Paula, then of course, then we will look at that. Anything that does, we do of course answer any concerns. And the third question was about drainage. Gosh, that's a big question, and actually there's lots of different aspects. But yes, again, if you've got a condition attached to a planning approval, then that will, and there's something that is going wrong on the site, then that will naturally come to my team. It may very well be that it isn't necessarily, depending on the matter, it may be that it isn't always a breach of planning control, or it may be something that isn't instantly fixable, but it's something that then we work with, for example, Thames Water or whomever Environment Agency, to look at what is happening, working with our drainage team as well. The drainage team are fond of all knowledge because it's quite a complex area of regulation that we aren't all in control of. So, and
so the aspects of suds you mentioned, it's not often be picked up by the county council because they're usually linked to highway network and the highway as such. So again, it depends on who's involved, but the conditions is the starting point for our team, and then it depends on what's happened down the line in terms of whether it's then a highway authority, suds, the flood authority, county council, for example, whether they've got new roles, new powers coming on, which I think is now in place from our recollection. Yeah.
Thank you. So that's going to.
Yeah, it was just as we said, this is a really good report, and obviously this report is in the public domain. But is there a plan to specifically communicate around how well we're doing or how well your team's doing on this? Because I think people, if they just had one interaction with an enforcement case that they're not happy with, it's really easy for people to be unhappy. And I feel that if we communicate that the overall the picture is good, we're doing well compared to other councils, it would be a good news story.
I mean, certainly the report talks about bucking the change that you have across the UK. And I'm looking at Andy, and I'm sure he will put some words together if that's something I want to suggest. But yeah, I mean, that's something perhaps you want to think about as whether you want to suggest that to cabinet or cabinet member.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Yeah, can I add a little bit? Just it would be great. Just we have actually great resources. Just on the website regarding just and really clear framework in like enforcement statement. What's inside the scope and what's outside the scope, and it's just it would be great to educate just parishes together with showing just how we improving and working towards them. What exactly there? Because it looks like at the moment, the team is dealing with requests which completely not relevant, but it still takes time to, just to respond. And actually, it's pretty much kind of, just team doing something they're not supposed to do, but they cannot ignore any inquiries that come in from either parishes or residents.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. Councillor Benny.
I wonder what the SUDS example where you said sometimes it goes on to county, would that be a good example of something that's you can't write it off because it's not actually off your books, but it's not in your control? So
sometimes we can if it's wholly a matter for them.
Yeah,
because obviously they're responsible for certain aspects of planning that we're not. But a lot of the time it is something that we may actually have to do, wait for something else. And for example, where we've got off-site works with that's open to a legal agreement, what they call a Section 278 agreement, which is off-site works to do with highways and accesses, etc. Those works will be linked with the planning application, but it needs them to go through a whole nother legal agreement process, and until then they've implemented it all, then we will keep our case open, because potentially there may be something we need to do to step in. So it's about joint working. Sorry.
I'm right in thinking that you're reactive rather than proactive. So you just, well, not just, but you respond to reports given to you rather than looking for.
Yes,
you haven't got enough work to do.
Yeah, driving around.
Yeah. No, it's terrible actually. Once you become an enforcement officer, you can't go anyway. My husband's forever saying, "For goodness sake, put blinkers on, don't look." You find bleachers everywhere you look. And I live in Hampshire, so it's a big journey. But no, the holy grail is for us to become much more proactive. That in you talk to any enforcement team across the country, we're all in the same boat. But we would like to be able to add a much more proactive element to our working, whether it be project work, to actually work again interdepartmentally, to actually work as a big team to maybe enhance the town centre, such as warm its amenity drop, or it may be that we work on allocated sites and make sure work proactively with developers before they start. That's always a biggie, to make sure they start on the front foot and we don't get a retrospective set of applications, or if we do, we're expecting them and know which way it's going to go. So those, as I say, that's the dream. And that's what we're working hard with this other work, to try and reduce the old stuff so we can really focus on moving forward positively.
And I wonder if we had a wish list, a little fairy dust, what would you hope for in terms of getting enforcement to be more proactive, or, the area being more compliant? Yes, how can we help with that?
Actually, one of the big things would be to ask residents to talk to one another more.
That'd be novel, wouldn't it?
And maybe to tolerate each other more, and to think about, not just because working on principle, we'd all love to be, I'm sure all very highly principled, but actually we can't take action just on the basis that there's a principle here. We have to look at planning harm. So it's that understanding that not every reported breach is going to have any action, is going to have action taken. So it's really, it is more about communication and tolerance and understanding that it's harm we're looking at. And actually, yes, you don't like your neighbour's shed, but really, is it something you think the public purse needs to be used for, to actually, you have to pull the resource in of the local authority, or is it something that is actually something you can discuss with your neighbour to try and resolve between you?
Part of comms, I think, maybe.
Yeah. I'm going to move us on. I think we've been asked to consider continued progress of the team's performance, which I think we have done, and I think we're all really impressed. So well done, and thank you for sharing yet such an excellent report with us. And we've been asked to provide any comments to the cabinet member for planning and development management. And I think the three comments that I've written down here are that there is an intractable backlog that we know you're conscious of, but we would really like to see on downward curve again, because it feels like it's stalled a bit. Perhaps for you to challenge yourselves in terms of KPIs, not just to sit on success and to keep going. Biodiversity net gain is a major piece of cross-departmental work, and I know there's going to be a huge amount coming through this year, and that we would ask the cabinet to make sure that is the top of the agenda, perhaps, and that the cabinet and the comms team can perhaps work on a communication plan, both to communicate the improvements that have been made and to really show the triage system as a model of good practice, but also to maybe to help with the relationships with the residents. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah.
I propose
if we can reduce 10% of enforcement claims, if you like, because people are talking to each other, because district councillors have actually addressed that in a parish council meeting, that's a really positive thing.
Yeah. Or if we can all send one less email because we've been hassled by a parish council by communicating better. Okay, so are we happy
Yes.
with that one? Okay, with that all got that?
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. In that case, I think we'll move to the next item. Thank you ever so much, team.
It's really good.
Thank you for your time and all your work. And yeah, as the owner of a listed building, I am alarmed. But obviously, I'm not going to do anything naughty. But yeah, very interesting. Thank you ever so much to the comms team now and to Lucy. I've got on my list that Hemera Plume is going to be presenting, and you're not.
I'm not Hemera Plume though, so Hemera Plume has not been able to join us this evening, so I'm going to do my best to be Hemera as much as I can.
Okay.
She's the depth of knowledge, but I'm pretty sure I'm across most of it. So.
Well, thank you ever so much then for coming. And we have Cabinet Member Lucy Edwards here to introduce item 9 on our agenda, which is the consultation and engagement report, which says lots of good stuff in. So thank you ever so much. Lucy, would you like to introduce your report? Then thank you for waiting. Appreciate it's late.
Well, it was all very fascinating and wonderful to listen in and take some notes, actually. But thank you very much, and apologies I can't be there in person this evening. So I'll just dive straight in. So yeah, the report basically is, for me, I can see it's a seminal report. It's the first of its kind that the council has done. And we can always see that there, with all reports, especially annual reports, there's room for improvement and development, and that's hence coming to scrutiny meetings. The report covers South and Vale, but you'll have seen in the report that there are lots of examples directly relevant to Vale. And it demonstrates a lot of the variety of methods and tools that are now in use, and the fact that engagement is much more interactive than it used to be. But I wanted to sort of reflect on the objective of the report, which, it is, this is a benchmarking report as a first of its kind, and it's really about showcasing and showing up where the gaps are to ensure that councils going forward can reach all audiences. So on to that, the demographics are interesting and will be kept under review. You can, see that it's a broad indication of where focus needs to be put in terms of energies to find, the lesser heard voices, and particularly around the youth audience as well. We know it's a real struggle to reach the under 24s. And the team, before that, so it really supports the council's corporate plan in terms of consulting and engagement, and showing, an open and inclusive way. And I think that the team is to be commended for, always trying to strive using technologies and digital means to do better. And looking on the whole, the response rates are looking promising for the future, particularly going into next year with local plan and corporate plan consultations. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Lucy. I hadn't really appreciated that it was the first of its kind. So yeah, thank you for bringing it to us. And I'm sure we're going to have a lovely discussion. Andy, have you got anything that you'd like to add?
No, nothing further to add, but happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you ever so much. Councillor Gascoigne, your hand went straight up.
But I love this because as has pointed out, I know it's the first one because I've never seen it before. And I'm thrilled because I think that residents often will say, I've seen it loads, where they say, we were consulted and nothing changed. And I know that that's not true because I'm on this side of it, but those people don't know that that's true. And obviously you can't listen to every single comment and make changes that meet everybody's needs. But this report clearly lays out the specific actions that were taken as a result of the questions that were asked. And I especially like the thing about the demographics of the audience as well, because I've seen that in previous reports. But what's good about this one is that it shows you what the demographics are of this council, because whenever I saw the figures, I was like, that doesn't look like many, obviously like men and women, it's kind of 50-50, but like ethnic minorities, I didn't really have a grasp of what the demographics were, whereas this report shows that. So I think it's really great. The only thing that I can pick out that I think could improve, and forgive me if it is written in the report, but when I read it, I couldn't see on each of the individual things necessarily how people were asked, like where does the consultation come from? Yeah, because I know some of them because I've been involved, and obviously they're on our website and stuff, but it's obviously I know that other times we reach out a bit more specifically. So how does that get there? Like one that stuck out to me just because I can relate to it is like there was stuff about Cornerstone, that people were consulted. And with my resident hat on rather than my councillor hat, I wasn't consulted and I go there every week, just as an example. So how are we reaching out? How is that actually done? Would be the only thing I would say could be improved here, just so that there's that context. Because I was once, it wasn't this council, I was somewhere else, and I don't know if that council hadn't reached their target of who they wanted to speak to because there was somebody physically in a leisure centre taking physical notes. So maybe that's one method we also use, but it's not written here.
So your question is, what are the different platforms that we're using to reach
precisely? And it might be different for the different things.
Yeah.
Well, I can take that if you want, Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I have any build for you, I will.
Yeah. So the short answer to that question, for the year that was covered by this report, the vast majority of that was covered by our old online survey system, which was called Smart Survey. We have, in the last 5 to 6 months, started to expand the variety of systems that we've been using. Over COVID, it was very easy to resort to just looking at the online consultations, and actually got incredibly high engagement rates during COVID because they're particularly in the lockdowns, people were at home and they had nothing else to do. That's the long and short of it. We made sure we got lots of people's email addresses while we were doing that, so we've got those people on our database. But yeah, so I think there was a bit of a default for online surveys. It's actually written into the corporate plan as well that we need to review how we look at the effectiveness of online surveys, and that's what we've been doing. So we do have a new system which is called Citizen Space, which is being configured as we speak. I'm actually tomorrow sending Councillor Edwards what it looks like, so she can have a look at the new system. But crucially, in particularly talking about the gaps in the demographics that we're hitting, we realise and we've noticed that we need to get out on the streets more. It is really resource intensive.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why councils tend to be quite hesitant at doing it. But the fact is, we are not getting young people, we're not getting very old people, yeah, the best way to get those people is to get out there and speak to them. So, for example, the joint local plan consultation that will hopefully be taking place very early next year, we've got some plans to get out into some cafes, for example, which is where people are. So we're going to set up in the corner of a cafe, have all of the materials, and get people to come and talk to us, because it's about getting out to people where they are. And you will get the people who aren't normally engaging with council activities, and that's crucial. And another one as well is schools and other areas where young people are. It's actually quite challenging getting schools to engage with us, but we have got some really good contacts with the community safety team. In fact, I was talking to Karen Brown earlier on today, actually, funnily enough, about getting out into local schools and local youth groups and things like that to start speaking to young people. Joint local plan in particular is one that we're really keen to make sure we're speaking to young people about, particularly people at kind of college age, because the people who are going to be more impacted on housing issues than anybody else. So yeah, so in terms of what's covered by this report, very much just kind of online surveys, which is probably why we haven't specified in there, but absolutely we'll look in the future to be more descriptive of what we're doing, because it's our ambition to get out there and do different things.
Yeah. Sorry, and I just to follow up, and then I know I've taken a lot of airtime. That makes a lot of sense, and I don't disagree with. I think the combination that you just described going forward will be good, because I think you do need the online ones because it's the reach, but then obviously engaging with people when you talk to them, particularly if you just saw a thing that said joint local plan. If you don't know what that is, you're not going to click on it, you won't engage. But if you're there, you can explain what it means. But yeah, for the online stuff, because a lot of these things are specific to an area or a service. So I assume you didn't just, it wasn't in a general press release, like to go back to the Cornerstone example, like was that, do you push it to people who are members of Cornerstone, or like, because just putting it on the website is like, well, those people who read that might never have been to Cornerstone because it's in a specific place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
how does it get to the right people?
So whenever we start a piece of engagement with officers around the council, we'll sit down. Who are your audience is? So we have our generic consultation engagement audiences. We have various databases, various kind of consultees, some who take part in lots, some who never take part. But we also speak to them about who their specific audiences are. I can't actually remember what the specific avenues we did for Cornerstone, but yeah, we would sit down and say, right, who are your audience, who are your key audiences, what mailing lists have you got, who are your statutory consultees and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, so I would have thought we would have gone out to because I now also look after marketing for Cornerstone and the Beacon, and so we have mailing lists for those people. So I would have thought we would have gone straight out to those mailing lists when we were doing those pieces of engagement. But yeah, so that's the approach we take. It's a variety of methods. Weirdly, Facebook is by far and away the most successful. Apart from directly mailing people, Facebook is the most successful way we get comments back from people, which are actually somewhat distorts our demographics as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you.
Councillor Boulder.
Yes, it's getting late, I'll be short. Really interesting report, really great to see all the things going on it. My problem is it's, I look at a budget and an outcome and I say we're doing 10% under, easy to work out whether we're doing well or badly or get an explanation. What I struggle with this report is actually understanding how effective we are, how effectively we're doing what we're doing. It's as simple as that, really. And as I was sitting here, I was wondering how you can do that. And the only way I can think of is some sort of benchmarking against other local authorities and other people doing the same sort of thing. And so that was really to ask, is there a way when we can assess the resources that we're putting into this, whether they're being well used or efficiently used or inefficiently used, for example? Actually, one of my sort of other questions would be, how many people have we got working on this? How much is it costing? All those sorts of things are the things that I think we need to be looking at in terms of, the efficiency of this as distinct from the general good work, if you know what I mean.
So the first point on there, the benchmarking thing is something we're very keen to do. And actually that was part of the rationale for starting to gather demographic data as was standard, as routine. Councils were not doing that previously for a variety of perfectly good reasons. But in terms of benchmarking and in terms of giving ourselves essentially soft targets to hit in terms of what makes a successful consultation, that's why we started doing that. Actually, it's a conversation that I want to have before we start next year, which is actually some way of defining what actually makes a good consultation or what makes a successful piece of engagement. Previously, when we came to Scrutiny, a question came to us, which was, are you going to set KPIs, how many, on response numbers? But response numbers is actually a pretty poor way of measuring the success of a consultation, because you might consult and ask questions really badly, really inefficiently, and get really, really bad data out of it, but have 10,000 people responding. And then, I could run to you and say, look, 10,000 people have responded. That's a successful consultation, when actually, in reality, the data that we've got from it is very poor. So that's something that we want to do. We want to find a good definition for what makes a successful consultation. And actually benchmarking against other local authorities is a really good one. we've got our neighbouring authority here. The other two rural districts, Cherwell and West, are doing very similar things. They've got relatively similar demographics as well. So yeah, that's actually a very good shout for that. In terms of just in terms of the very specific point you made at the end there's 3 people who work in the consultation and engagement team. I am actually doing some work as we speak, and I was working on it today on trying to identify how much a piece of engagement costs us in terms of staffing costs. I'm actually a bit reluctant to give you the numbers right now because it's a bit of a back of an envelope job, but it will be put into a report at some point. But I can tell you now, it's significantly cheaper than if we were getting an external organisation to do it. So
that would be great if that's benchmarked as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Andy. Mark, online, you've got your hand up there. Please jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. There's a number of points, just picking up on what Andy's saying there. We have a small and perfectly formed team who do some excellent work. One of the results of this was last year we did an issues joint local plan consultation, which we were shortlisted for a national award. The Local Government Chronicle shortlisted us with a number of metropolitan authorities. We didn't win, but we were shortlisted, and I think that shows the value of the work of the team. I think in terms of benchmarking, response rates, as Andy has said, is a very crude analysis of that. It will depend on the consultation subject that you're looking at. So, for example, community governance reviews will get a smaller number than a waste consultation, for example, because everybody has their bins collected or should have their bins collected. So that's going to generate more responses. So we have to be careful about producing KPIs as well. What we want to do is good consultation that gets recognised, hence mentioned in the award. As we've said right at the start, this is the first report of its kind. It is a starting point. And coming back to the beacon, we didn't just rely on online social media posts. We did reach out to people who were using that facility, people who are coming into the building and consulting with the hirers of the facility as well, because they're an important audience who were using that facility. And we wanted to see what we could do more of with them to make that consultation fuller. Hopefully that answers some of the questions.
Thank you, Mark. That's very helpful.
Just coming back on that point, Mark, I'd always expect your group to come up with the KPIs rather than us to impose on you when you don't know. So I think it's something where you need to. I would expect you to be proactive in coming through, and then we can comment on them. So I wouldn't dream of sitting here and telling you what those KPIs should be.
No, absolutely. I didn't take it as such, and apologies if it came across that. That's what I was saying. In terms of KPIs, looking at raw numbers of responses, I think we have to be careful on that. What I want to run, as Andy has said, is a good consultation service with the resources that we have, and to make sure that as many people engage with it as possible. So we are looking to increase numbers where we can for the right projects. Clearly, as has been mentioned by Councillor Edwards, joint local plan next year and corporate plans are going to be big set piece consultations, which we will be using that new software for, and hopefully we can garner a lot of responses from those processes, particularly as the new software is far more interactive than what we've used before. It's not just sending out a list of questions. It will be more intuitive, it will be more visual, which hopefully will engender more responses from people.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Cox.
I was just going to ask, and apologies if this is covered in the report, which is excellent. I would like to add. But in terms of some of those consultations that go out that perhaps are less successful in terms of the numbers of, either be the numbers of responses or the value of the data, what is sort of the internal review process of that, of looking? So, for example, the one that really stood out for me was the South Hempstead Community Governance Review, mostly because it partly covered my patch in Kennington, where 5 people, who I'm sure are very invested and gave absolutely worthwhile responses to this, but only 5 people responded to that. So I was wondering, is there sort of an internal review of, okay, well, we tried it, we tried this subject in this way, that clearly didn't work. What is the better way of doing it in the future?
This we actually use this report as a way of doing that. So we sit down and we look at the data, and we build this report as we. I'm going to say we build it. This this is the first one we've done, but we are currently building the second one as we're going along. So whilst we do that, we're having natural, constant conversations within the team about, okay, so what methods will we be using here? So that, so this is what we did on social media. I'm also the manager of the communications team, which is very helpful as well, because it means we have access to all of the, for example, the social media analytics on how well we've gathered information, how well we've, if we put a post out about a governance, community governance review on Twitter, how many people are clicking on that? So yeah, we do. We're constantly self-reviewing our methods. In the comms team, the engagement team, work very closely on those kinds of things. We are our own fiercest critics in terms of whether or not we're actually successful in getting to people. I think in terms of absolute numbers, it's one of the interesting things as well. So, for example, conservation area appraisal consultations, sometimes those only actually impact 4 people. And if we get one person responding, you can say that's 25%, but actually you might want all 4 of those people to consider it a successful piece of engagement. So every single one has a different kind of what does success look like, and we do have that conversation. We usually have that conversation with the people we're doing the engagement with. What does success look like to you? And we'll give them the benefit of our advice and our experience about how we've done these things in the past and what tends to look like. So yeah, we do review that, and it's something that potentially we can kind of formalize and write down. It is usually just kind of soft conversations on an ongoing basis at the moment, but yeah, it's something that we're hugely keen to make sure we do.
Thank you. I do have a question, which is, I am very convinced by this report, and I'm very convinced that this team is doing amazing work. So my question really is really for Lucy, I guess, is once we reach all these people we haven't reached before, they're going to start giving us very different answers. Are we as a council ready to respond to the very different priorities and answers that we're given once we start reaching different people? Because I think in order to gauge success, comms team can gain some amazing data, hand it over, but if we don't do anything with that, it's not successful. So I guess, are we ready to act on that?
I think that's a really good question. I think that we always have to have a notion of preparedness in everything that we do in communications, and particularly in what the feedback we can gain when we gain more data. But I think, to answer your question, I think that the key is going out, particularly with the joint local plan consultation and engagement coming out, to have a readiness of where we can reach. And I think that's the greatest opportunity we have going forward, and the corporate plan consultation. And I think using that data, it's only the first half of next year. If we can gain as much knowledge as possible, then I'm sure the team can navigate through what kind of campaigns they might do to reach those new audiences that have come on board, which would be fantastic. So I see it as a huge opportunity going forward.
Thank you, Lucy. Question. Councillor Roberts.
Yes, in sort of hard to reach areas, we used to have a youth council a long time ago. I don't know whether anything along those lines are thought. The other areas I always think might be difficult to get to are things like businesses, where they're not really at their home address as residents, but they're actually on a high street. And some of the policies changes and things like car parking, can obviously affect businesses quite strongly. Citizens' assemblies are a good idea, but on the whole quite expensive. Have we thought about doing maybe telephone polls or having a selective panel? I seem to remember we used to have a selective panel, but that's going back a long way, where we had a sort of a panel that was of volunteers who were demographically proportionate to the population that we had, and then that was a quick way of contacting sort of a good group. So have we thought about a kind of scaled down version that we might be able to afford?
The quickest answer to that question is we constantly think about all of the alternative things that we can do. We constantly look at what are the alternatives to our current methods. Now, the old citizens panel that you mentioned that we had when I first started at the council was about 12 years ago. That was slowly ebbing away from being an effective means of engagement. I wasn't working on consultation engagement at the time, but they were getting less and less interaction with that panel. A good number of those people actually still make up a consultation database that we use. So it's about 1,500 people who are signed up to receive notifications about consultations that are taking part in the district. And as well, there's about 5,000 who are signed up to the planning policy mailing list to hear about local plans. That includes businesses as well. So we still do have mechanisms like that. So that is one of our avenues of getting the message out there. Things like youth councils. It is something getting into the eyes and ears of young people is something that drives everything we do at the moment. I'm always a little hesitant about using a standing group of people, which is one of the reasons I'm not overly fond of our consultation database as a primary source of information, because you're just addressing the same people that you ask all the time. So that's why we're trying to find different avenues, and that's why we want to try and mix up the areas that we're going to. As you said, I mean, a lot of those things are very expensive. The city council tried to pull together a demographically representative sample to be part of their kind of citizens group, but they ended up with basically all the people that always put their hands up. So it is a challenge. It's an ongoing, constant challenge that we're seeking to find ways around. But yeah, we use a variety of methods. We look to see what our neighbouring authorities are doing. We look to see what's industry best practice. We're all members of the Consultation Institute, so we're constantly keeping up to date with what other authorities are doing. Actually, just on the youth point, West Oxfordshire District Council just did a really good piece of engagement with young people. I think it's like a charter for young people, so it was very specifically for young people. But they got out and they got several thousand responses from people under the age of about 25. So I've already been speaking to their to their consultation people to find out exactly how they did that, because we just want to use best practice wherever we can.
That's great, thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you. I wonder whether you'd had any engagement with Abingdon and Whitney College and their developmental courses, because they might be interested in doing some consultation facilitation for you. Might be worth to try. I wasn't sure how many people are on your team.
So the team is 3 people.
Really? So it's not very many, really.
So it doesn't include me, but yes, the team is Humera, the team leader, and 2 officers.
Okay. And how?
And that's for South and Vale.
Oh, wow. Okay. I appreciate some of this is statutory consultation, but I wonder how it's decided what is consulted upon.
So a big chunk of it is statutory consultation. A big chunk of it is non-statutory but good practice. So a lot of it is just officer experience around the organisation. We want to do X, Y, Z to a policy. We're probably going to have to go out to consultation. There is a process that pretty much every team has as to whether or not we should be consulting on this or engaging with the general public. The planning department, for example, in developing a local plan, so planning policy rather than the planning department, developing a local plan, you only actually have 2 statutory consultation points during the development of a local plan. In this one, we're probably going to do about 4 or 5. And that is just because it's the ambition of the officers involved to say that we really want to hear from people. I'm, and as the entire team, big champions of making sure that we get public feedback in what we're doing. And so we are touting our best to the organisation to let people know, let officers know that we're here. And, you know, members can be great advocates for that as well. Cabinet members in particular, you know, they speak to their officers and say, we really want to get people's feedback on this. So that's the method that we look for.
And the last one, sorry. We've all done it. We go online, we click the link, we're going to get halfway through and just give it up. So I wonder how much IT support and how much it affects, you know, do you feel that's a resource that is adequately facilitated for your department?
We've just invested in a new piece of software. So Citizen Space it's one of the industry standards. It's not the most expensive, but I think bang for buck, I think it's probably the best value. And it is much easier to use. It's much more stable than a number of them. There's a couple out there at the moment there's one called Commonplace, which is very popular because it's let's pull around on a map and let's put things on a map but it's actually quite clunky. And yeah, you often get those technical problems. The one that we bought is very stable, it's very good, it's very easy to use as well, and it can be as simple or as complex as you want to make it. So
thank you. Councillor Backstone.
Yeah, firstly, can I say this is a really good report. It's one of the best reports I've seen for a long time. I was looking at particularly at the page on taxi tariffs, where quite rightly, most of the taxi drivers disagreed with us, and you've put this in great detail. And that's good because we've actually said that we took their views into account, and to a large extent, we rejected them. But I was just confirming we do put all the consultations that we do are in this report. It is totally comprehensive.
So the only two things from the last the last financial year that was not mentioned in this report are two neighbourhood plan consultations, which were just ongoing whilst we put together the report. But everything else, this is a comprehensive overview of all of the pieces of engagement that we did, all of the, so not just consultations, but things like feedback forms and surveys and things like that. We're really keen to start doing a lot more light touch stuff as well on social media, just to get kind of straw polls here and there as well. They aren't necessarily going to divert specific policies, but it's useful to get a little kind of straw poll here and there. So managing to get everything like that into a report like this might become a bit unwieldy, so that we'll keep that under review as we go on. But yes, this one is everything that happened in the last year.
I know nothing about it, but do we use TikTok?
We don't at the moment. We don't at the moment. So my eldest child almost made me promise never ever to get a council TikTok account. But no, we have looked at it. There are significant challenges, actually resource challenges to it, and it's one of those things of whether or not the resources we put into it would actually get what we want out of it. Oxford City Council, loads and loads of time, effort and energy into their TikTok account for the good space of a year, and I think they've still got probably about 100 followers on there. It's just they just don't gain traction from it.
Okay, thanks.
I think on that note, and given the time, so I think our first comment to Cabinet is that we require a TikTok account that performs better than Oxford City. Maybe not. Has anyone else got any? Councillor Hallett, final question.
I have only questions.
Okay.
I have three suggestions. Mark Minion, you talked about the consultation for which we were shortlisted for a big award. I couldn't find that in the report. I wondered if it was in the time frame. If it is in the time frame, that we should certainly have that in the report about that award. So you guys can check on that. I think the report is fabulous, and I think that when you're ready to publish it, you need to make sure that you've got a link on the data hub that's recently been created. Okay, you got that under control. And finally, the other thing that's not in here that could be is your learning points for the year. What are the main things you're taking away from your successes, and also places where it could have gone better than you'd hoped? Because always we try to learn from our mistakes, and when a consultation goes bad, it's a really good opportunity to learn from it. So I would say for next time, that would be an extra step to take, and I'd like to see those suggestions go to cabinet.
Okay.
Unless someone disagrees with them. Thank you.
So in terms of then, let's move then to our recommendations to Cabinet. So we are again being asked to note the consultation and engagement report. Thank you ever so much, and provide any comments to Cabinet. So I think, Councillor Hallett, what you've just suggested really picks up on this comments that you were making about self-review. Perhaps we would ask for some kind of formal, perhaps in next year's report, look back on this report. What do you take from this report and review the learning? So if we could make that a formal, much more better worded comment, perhaps than I've just done. So some kind of formal review of this, and and how we've learned. The comment that we picked up very first, which Councillor Gascoigne made about platforms, and that might be something, as you said, that actually more naturally comes in next year. But and also I suspect some, you've just invested in a piece of software. I think given that we've been looking at financial outturns as well, the value for money that has got. So yes, there's some comment about platform. Were there any other recommendations for Cabinet that anybody would like us to add in?
Chair, I would say that what I would suggest that what we would like to see is a development of a framework of criteria which can be used to assess the effectiveness of services being provided, including benchmarking points as well, which is again a value for money point.
Okay.
I'm not sure I agree with that. Could you say more? I don't understand. You're talking about a year-end report, and it would have what in it?
I think what the report lacks, in my opinion, is any basis for working out whether it's being done effectively or not. What we need is some criteria for setting out whether this is effective, including benchmarking against other councils, which is what we were talking about earlier. And it's actually, I understand, something that they're interested in developing.
Okay, and I think that would possibly pick up on my comment as well, which is this question of what do we do with the data? So one of the markers of effectiveness is where were the direction changes as a result of consultation, perhaps? So it might be.
That's already in all the individual reports, the consultation statements that come out.
Yeah. I think the taxi one taxi tariff was a really good example there.
Yeah, they're all like that though. Every consultation, all the statements are addressed in the report that comes back. So that's already done, except that it's not summarized for your benefit. You'd have to go trawling through it all.
I think we're missing the point here. I mean, there's no way in this report and I'm sure they are doing a fantastic job. I thought it was a really excellent report of working out whether this is an effective operation or an ineffective operation compared with other authorities, other ways of doing it. We need some criteria by which we can judge performance, and that's not there at the moment.
Okay, so I think then, so that's quite succinct actually, is we're going to ask Cabinet to work with the comms team to develop some criteria to evaluate performance. Beth?
It's about effort and careful use of resource, isn't it? You've got 3 members of staff. We would all love to have people on the street and doing effective consultation, but I mean the figure of 8 people responding to the wards boundaries in Grove and East Chellow was striking. But why would people respond? What does it mean to them? What a waste of time. 8 people out of 8,000. And I can tell 2 of them are probably sat in this room. So it sort of was that